as John said, I'm an area soil specialist for Natural Resource Conservation Service from daylight till 3:30, you might say, and then we have our own operation at home. We have a cow-calf operation. We background some calves. We try to keep them around after we wean them for a while. And one of the things that has really we really try to practice what we preach, because it's not easy, and trying to figure out how to get all that done and do some of these things helps me deliver it to people like you. So today's talk, I don't want it to be a lecture, I want it to be a visit for the next hour, is what can we do on our grazing systems to take them to the next opportunity for soil health, and why would we want to do that? Well, I've listened this morning and last night. We listened to the carbon talk last night, right? So methane circles, and so we don't need to worry about that. But carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere for we don't know how long. That's the answer. That we said 1,000, but that's only because that's longer than a lifetime, and 2 lifetimes, and 3 lifetimes, and 4 lifetimes, and finally we got to maybe 10,000 years that it stays in the atmosphere. So we know that when we put it there, it stays. Well, maybe not. We might increase the level, but we can take some carbon out of the atmosphere. We can take some of that and put it back into our soils. We're going to talk about that today, and how we can increase the amount of organic matter that has readily gone down, and pretty well has gone down to a level that it's at right now. But what can we do to get it back to where it may have started at 75, 80, 100 years ago? So then I listened to, I'm terrible with the names, but I did listen to Dr. Evans and Dr. Payne, and both of them had talks about we have a new Clostridium that's caused the red water disease and the liver flukes that give an extra problem to that. And if you've got liver flukes and the Clostridium, you've got a dead cow. If you don't have the liver flukes and you get the Clostridium, you got hope if you've got massive quantities of penicillin readily available. Now, what has that got to do with what I'm going to say? Well, taller grass grazing. You know, we've learned taller grass grazing helps us prevent the infestation or the larvae entering our animals. If we graze above what they can climb up in that dew in that wet area on the plant, then same with these liver flukes. They have a limit to graze above where they're at. Don't force the cattle to eat in areas there. We're going to be maybe he talked about where they might go into these areas that are wet and things like that. And so if we do a better job of grazing management, maybe we don't force them into the swamp to eat. And then the toxicology, Dr. he's sitting back here somewhere.
Evans.
Yeah, he's right there. He is, Dr. Evans.
Yeah.
And the toxicosis, the toxic levels of this, that, and the other. And again, if we encourage diversity and we encourage good grazing, then we have less opportunity for at least the smart cows to not be forced to eat perilla mint. If they've got something to eat, only the dumb ones will eat the perilla mint, and soon you'll have a smarter herd because there won't have as many dumb ones. So there is that. Fella that I know here, Landry, he asked me, where's this picture at? This is one of our farms here. This is actually one of my son's places. This was a 13-year-old stand of warm season grass. So 13 months. So we established it in the last week or so of April, and this is the last week of the following May. I threw this picture in here not for that reason, but if you come back at 4 when we talk about warm season grasses, we'll talk a little bit more about those benefits. But I threw it in here because it's a good illustration of a little taller grass grazing. Now this is warm season, but you notice the cows are not, you don't see their hooves. And we'd like to not see their hooves. We might like to not see much of their knee. Uh-oh.
Did you turn it on?
No.
Here, go ahead, you found it.
I've got the switch on.
I think so. Try things.
The other thing about these glasses is I can't see anything up close with them on.
They look good on you. They look very handsome.
I don't know. There's benefits and there's disadvantages of getting old. I don't know yet. There we go. So, objectives. Graze pasture in a manner that encourages increased biological activity. I hope that we're... That's not my problem. The projector and the computer are not visiting. That is exactly right. So while he's doing that, I'll continue on here. We want to increase the resilience and sustainability of grazing. Where's Robert at? Is he any? Did he leave us too? That's kind of weird. We want to increase forage production. Now, surely we want to do that, right? We want to have an increase of forage production, and we want to reduce the need to mitigate any situation. Because I will tell you, when you mitigate something, mitigation is next worst thing to litigation. Mitigation means write a check, right? There. Hey, look at there. Whatever you did, it went. So am I going to have to do that by hand or?
No.
Okay.
There you go. Excellent soil.
There we go. We're going forward. We're going backward.
Pick them down.
Yeah, we got it going. All right. So mitigation. Mitigation means you're buying hay, you're selling cows, you're doing something to get through a tough spot. There's some numbers in here that we're going to get into, and we'll get into some more numbers later on, but one thing that I want you to remember is that if you're overgrazed, then you have minimal resilience and sustainability. You're going to end up mitigating a weather factor 8 out of 10 years on that farm. If you have built in some resilience, if you've built in some things like higher organic matter, taller grass grazing, the stuff we're going to talk about, you'll only mitigate 3 years out of 10. That's profitability. That's affecting the money that you take home, the reason why you're in business. So, as we dive into these things, yeah, that moved, that didn't move, but that's okay. So I can see that. This is in Texas. As compared to heavy or light continuous grazing, multi-paddock grazing offers greater soil cover, offers lower soil penetration resistance, lower sediment loss, higher organic matter, and CEC, cation exchange capacity, increased fungal production. Now, population, maybe it says. Okay? Now these are the soil health principles that we've got to remember. It's easy to think about these when we think about cropland, and whenever you think about them, you want to maximize your diversity. You want to maximize a living root 365 days a year. You want to, I always get, when I forget what I said, then I forget where I'm going, but we're going to maximize the surface cover. We don't want any exposed soil surface, and we want to minimize the disturbance. Well, we're going to twist those words a little bit when it comes to grazing, but those 4 soil health principles are key. So how do we affect those principles in our grazing land? I can talk all day about cropland and how we can change cropland with no-till and cover crops and lengthening out the rotation and adding crops and diversity, but how do you get that done on your pasture lands? Well, it's not as hard as you might think. The effect of the carbon cycle with livestock. Now you think about, I just jumped right here, and so what happened? Oh, I just did that on purpose. You see, it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. Soil organic matter, CO2, plants, respiration. But when we add the ruminant animal, we add this livestock component in here, look at what happens. Now plants go to livestock, manure goes to soil organic matter to CO2, and we also go from livestock to CO2. We also go to the rumen microorganisms, the photochemical oxidation to take the CH4 back to CO2. So the carbon cycle is not simplified. That's what we want. We want a carbon cycle that we cycle through the plants. We want to cycle that carbon through manure. We want to put carbon in the animal. We want to put carbon back in. This may have a pointer, but I'm afraid to use it. Soil organic matter. That's the one that's really super important to us, okay? Yeah, now I can't see my slides, but we're all right. The impacts of soil health. On-farm trial in Mississippi comparing high stock density, rotational grazing, to continuous grazing. Several times higher total soil carbon in the topsoil and the subsoil. Now, what does that mean to us? What does that mean? Why do we need that? Well, we don't have time to discuss everything. We're going to short circuit that. That means more nutrient cycling. That means better plant growth, but it also means better water holding capacity in our soils. So a few of these numbers to remember. This one is a big factor here, is that 1% organic matter will hold 1 acre inch of water, depending on your physical characteristics of your soil, in 6 to 8 inches of that soil. So that means if we improve our soil organic matter from 1.8 to 2.8 in the upper 6 to 8 inches, we hold 1 more inch of water. 1 more inch of water means that much more plant growth. But it also means some other things to our soil biology. Now, if I replicate that again and I increase that to 3.8 and I increase it, say, by 1% in the next 12 inches, or 6 to 8 down to 12 inches, and so on and so forth, with deeper roots, and deeper roots come from better plant grazing, so we'll get to that slide in a minute. But this whole water business is incredible, okay? So last night I asked the gentleman, I don't remember his name, I'm terrible with names, about water vapor. Water vapor is the strongest greenhouse gas we know of. They figured it out in the late 1800s. It's extremely efficient greenhouse gas. He's right. It hasn't changed much in the last few decades because we depleted our organic matter 25 years ago. Right after World War II, we had readily supplies of synthetic fertilizers and nitrogen, and we used them, and they were incredible. The compounding effects that had on our organic matter, that those soils were cycling and had that available to them, we were incredible at crop production. But we also sped up the loss of that organic matter, the breakdown and the utilization of it to where we are now. So now, just the opposite of what I just told you, think about how much water is not in the soil anymore. We've taken roughly 4%, 3.5%, 4% of the organic matter out of our soil in our zone here. You go south, it's maybe not so much different, but they can't build it as high as we can. You go to Canada, they can build it a lot higher because of the climate. Bottom line is, we need to reverse that. We need to start building that carbon level, that organic matter, start storing more water in our soils, build the resilience in our grazing system, and voila, we grow more grass. More grass means that we have less of the problems that everyone that I've heard talk at this symposium so far is talking about. We can reduce those issues. We won't eliminate them, but we can reduce them. So what are some of the advantages? High quantity and quality forage for livestock from perennials. How do you grow more grass? I think we're going to get to that slide here in just a minute. But I want you to remember something. Grass begats grass. Okay? Grass grows grass. Grazing providing for an adequate leaf area. Protect the soil from raindrop impact, evaporation, and infiltration. So we don't want any evaporation. We want to eliminate evaporation. What we want is transpiration. Okay? So when we look at evaporation, that would be water lost through a bare soil. From the soil straight into the atmosphere without being utilized through the plant. That's costing you money. Transpiration, water vapor, or the easiest way to think about that is plant sweat. Okay? Water lost through the plant is transpiration. It's been used by the plant for cell reproduction and plant growth and all the things plants do. We've utilized it. We've made use of it. It didn't get lost. It was used. Okay? It's a byproduct of plant growth. That's what we want. And in order to do that, we've got to increase infiltration. Infiltration is going to come from the soil biology. If we feed the soil better, we get better infiltration. It's connected. It's interconnected. You can't take them apart. We cannot take plant health, grazing profitability, and soil biology cannot be taken apart. They are intertwined. One cannot be without the other. I've missed that, plant diversity. Maintains and improves plant diversity. You know, we just create most of our own problems. We're our own worst enemy. We're very habitual. We create a monoculture, and if we don't create it by accident, we intentionally create it because it's easy for us to manage. It's very difficult for us to get our mind wrapped around managing a wide range of plants in a pasture. We get one little weed out there and we get all nervous about it, and we don't know how to control it without killing all the good things that are in our pasture. Well, maybe there's some things we could do to overcome that. But if we have a monoculture and all you want out there is one particular grass, you got brome grass and that's all you want, you see a weed, it's no problem. Spray it, you're done. Yep, didn't hurt a thing that I want, I only want brome grass. Well, maybe not. I don't know, where did that go? Need for mechanical harvest goes down. We're going to talk more about that at 4 o'clock and how the incorporation of warm season grasses is very holistic and affects a lot of things on our grazing system. But for this talk, mechanical harvest, if we're doing a better job of managing our grazing, we don't have to mechanically harvest. Maybe we don't have to clip as much. If we don't have to harvest it, maybe we don't even have to clip our pastures as much. Biological acceleration, improving soil health at a faster rate. So there is a plateau that each management will stop at. So if we have a particular farm and it is continuous graze, there's not a cross fence on it, and you're grazing it, and you make a change and you put one cross fence in it and you start moving the cows from one side to the other, there is a reaction to that. It will make an improvement, albeit very little, but it will make an improvement. If we continue to fence that, and we fence that into 8 pastures, and we get into something that rotates these animals around on a 3 to 5 day basis, we see another significant jump. And it'll be a lot more significant than the jump we made with the one fence. Okay? But it will come to that plateau, and that's where your biology, that's where your grass production, that's where your diversity is going to become static. What we got to do is take it to the next level. So, if you go to the gym every day and you do 20 reps with a 10-pound barbell, you will build muscle mass for a short period of time. because your arms know that all they have to do is 20 reps with a 10-pound barbell. But if you want to get arms like this, what you do is you never let your arms know what you're going to do to them next. Now you start to do 10 reps with 100 pounds one day, and you do something different the next day. So your muscles have to prepare for whatever you may decide to do in the gym that day. They keep getting bigger and bigger. The soil biology and improving soil health at a faster rate, that's the way you need to graze. We'll get to that in just a minute. We can't be habitual. We don't move by the calendar. We don't start in the same pasture every year. We don't calve in the same field. We don't hay the same field. We keep things in a random, intentional randomness. So, well, that's interesting. Whatever you did, this hasn't budged at all. I thought only the left side, but there isn't anything moving there. The effect of grazing on the nitrogen cycle. We talked about carbon and CO2, and now we look at the nitrogen cycle. So the effects of grazing. I think, no. Okay. We have nitrogen that's in the atmosphere. We have plants that are legumes that take that atmospheric nitrogen, and by the help of bacteria, they make nodules. It feeds the soil organic, comes over here and feeds the biology, the decomposers, through the organic nitrogen. They help decompose. We have some of it that comes down here as ammonia. It moves over into nitrites, NO2, moves up to nitrates, and we have back to plant growth. Over here we have the denitrification. This is important, and I'll explain it just a little bit better. But we have the bacteria tying up nitrogen. They are eating the carbon. Okay? So let me just put this in basically two things that you need to know that affects your pasture growth, and what you need to increase is the cycling of this nitrogen. So what happens is, when you put plant material on the ground, that plant material doesn't always need to be high protein. Neither does it need to always be high protein in the rumen. But we have to be careful that we don't feed our animals poor quality feed. We don't need to feed them the very highest quality feed, 365. Depending on our class of animal, we may have fall calving cows, spring calving cows, we may have stockers. We need to make sure that we do that. We need to feed the soil the same way. So when we have grazing events, we have the hoof action that puts material on the surface. That material needs to vary from time to time. We don't always need to feed a high protein. So when we think about protein, we think about nitrogen. When we think about carbon, we think about energy. Okay? So what happens is our bacteria, they have to have nitrogen to balance their diet because they're going to eat carbon. And they're very simple. They're a 5 to 1. They have 5 carbons and 1 nitrogen. So if they're going to eat something that's fairly high in carbon, they need to take nitrogen out of this cycle and use it. And when they die, they give it back. Also, when they get eaten, we have it given back. And so if you want more nitrogen in your system, and you want to buy less nitrogen from the co-op, then you increase this cycling that goes on. And in order to do that, you have to increase your bacterial and your fungal components. They're the ones generating the nitrogen and keeping it cycling. So if we want to lessen that input and save some money, then we need to get it out of this system. So the bacteria, they are responsible for taking and borrowing, I like to use that word, borrowing the nitrogen and they're also responsible for returning it back into the system for plant growth. Now this is an important slide right here. This slide's been around longer than John Turner. That's a long time. But look at what happens. Now we're all familiar with a teeter-totter. There's a lot of things when it comes to our grazing systems that when we teeter over, we upset the apple cart something terrible. And look at this slide very closely. When we remove 50% of the leaf, we only reduce root growth by 2 to 4%. But what happens next when we remove just 10 more percent, and we remove 60% of that forage? Look at what we've done to root growth. We've stopped half of it. So, biology, soil biology, the nutrient cycle, the carbon cycle, we depend on soil biology. They depend on roots. Your plant depends on roots to regrow. Do you want your plant that your cow's going to eat to spend its energy and its time regrowing the root mass, or growing a leaf back for your cow to eat? That's the million-dollar question right there. What do you want your plants to focus on? Feeding your animal or repairing themselves? If I hire you for an employee and take a stick and beat you, and you have to lay around, and I pay you to get better, and you work 2 days and I beat you again, that's not very efficient on my part. It's not very good for me to, I'm not getting much out of you. All you're doing is trying to repair from my beatings. That's what we do to our grazing plants. They spend their time repairing from our grazing beatings. Very, very important. When you graze the shoot, overgraze the shoot, you overgraze the root. And it's just what I said. These plants, when you look at this plant here, it's overgrazed. You see there's no roots. There's gobs of water down here. Plant can't get it. You know, the picture's worth a million words. Thousands. I'll say a million. Look at this one here. What's that? Oh, so we see this is just another picture of what happens whenever we start to remove and we see a full capacity plant. It's all of its roots. It's doing its thing, and we start to do things to it, and it starts to prune its roots back, and you can see what's going on here. And then pretty soon we end up with these shallow and very simplified roots, and we lose a major component within that root system is the fungi. So we can't support them either. Those plant roots are supporting that mycorrhizal fungi, and that is important for plants to be interconnected with other plants by the fungi. The fungi help with phosphorus, they help with nitrogen, they help with water absorption. So a plant may have 20 feet or 30 feet of root mass, but it may have 200 feet of ability when it intertwines with our fungal components. So it just 100-fold its ability to absorb nutrients and water. So we can't leave this untouched. Okay, this is a demonstration we would have liked to done, but it's hard to get everybody up outside, do this thing, get back in here in an hour. But this is a rainfall simulator, and I want you to see what's going on here on this simulator, and we're going to see a video of it here next. So you see these front jars are runoff, and the jars in the back are infiltration. So we have well-managed species, overgrazed species, and in the front jar, the overgrazed, is all of our water. So now what did I tell you about mitigation? He nodded his head, he got it. How many years are you going to mitigate out of 10 if you overgraze? 8. Well, it's just kind of neat that back in the 30s that they figured out that this overgrazed pasture right here on an inch of rain loses 8/10. Kind of the same number. 8/10 of an inch of water will run off. You get 2. You get 2/10 of an inch of water out of every inch. So somebody who's doing really good math, if we get 40 inches a year and you get 2/10, you're growing your grass, your farm's operating on how much water? I think that's 8 inches. So we're sitting here at 40. You might as well be growing grass in Texas. Now, is that going to play?
It did last night.
What'd you do? See, whatever John did to my thing, I can't see anything up here. What do I do to...
That worked fine for everybody. I think it's yours.
Hey, I got it. I hit one button and I got it. I don't know what I'm going to do. But here's the rainfall simulator that a good friend and I, we did. And I want you to see this rainfall simulator. We got about 4 minutes here. Now that tilled cropland, he is running his pocket knife through that tilled cropland to make sure that you see that tilled cropland is at its best for planter performance, okay? Now it's starting to rain. Here comes our inch of rain. You can see that right here is a little rain gauge. So I don't remember how much rain we put on it, but I want you to notice something right here. You see that? It's already running off the unmanaged or overgrazed pasture, and you see that it is not very drinkable. Now, look what happened to our perfect seed bed, the perfect opportunity here. And here it's running off.
It's interesting that it's less than unmanaged pasture.
So that's exactly what we would expect. We would expect for the first rain on tilled cropland to take about 1/3 to 4/10, 40% of that water. But if we run that same tray the next rain on that tilled cropland, it's already packed, it's already slaked the surface, it's already sealed, and that's why it's running off. And the next time that we run it, it will beat on runoff, it will beat the overgrazed pasture. So you start to see what's going on. We have good infiltration back here, and back here we have some runoff because we know we're going to have some runoff with this type of intensity rain, and those old studies would show that we would get 2 to 2.5 of runoff, but we are absorbing or infiltrating. I'm going to use infiltrating because we'll talk about absorption in a minute maybe, but we are infiltrating that water. If you want to use this water, you have to get it, okay? Doesn't do you any good to get a rain. This doesn't do you any good to get a rain and for you to just let it run off and head down to the neighbor or head down to the creek or the branch.
Thank you.
Yeah, if it's headed to the branch, that's no good. We didn't get to use it. And the other thing that I want you to just think about for a minute as this is finishing up Every time we get a heavy dew, all we hear is turn around, don't ground. All the time. We got anybody in here that's got one of those branches that when they were a little kid, they went down there and fished? Can you go down there and fish now? You don't know how many people, well, I don't know what's wrong with the creek. I used to go down there as a kid and catch fish, and now it's only got water in it about 10 days a year. And the 10 days a year that's got water in it, it's out of bank flow and took their water gaps out.
Drexel, pause it. Pause right there.
I don't know how.
Oh. Well, not to interrupt your story, but make sure you explain that part of it.
Nope, got to start over.
Ah!
All right, that didn't work, so we won't start over. But did you see the picture when we turned the tray over? I wasn't watching. And when we turned the tray over, it was dry, wasn't it? It was just bone dry on the bottom side. That's what cropland that's tilled like that does. It will infiltrate that first 3/4 of an inch, and then it slakes over, it seals over, and we don't get any infiltration. So, yeah, that's a really good point to make. So.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but
thank you for that, Robert.
That was your grand finale.
That's what happens. That's what happens with our. That's what happens right there with our stream dynamics. We get a rain and we get this instead of getting this over here. And so what happens when we get a rain? Our creeks jump out. They run for 2 or 3 days and go dry again. What we've got to do is get this water in. Okay. And I got to get moving here because we're going to run out of time because I want to get this back to your grazing system and your objective. Grazing is a tool that can improve the resource or it can degrade the resource. This is what we've done for a good while. You know, we've made some repairs. We've done some good things with grazing systems for 35, 40 years. Right, John? I mean, gosh, it's been a while. Started in the 90s, right, with a real hard swing toward grazing systems, and some before that. And we've done a lot of good things. We've stopped the bleeding. Grazing system objectives is to provide adequate nutrition, protect and feed soil, feed the above and below ground herd. If you feed the below ground herd, they will feed the above ground herd. If you take more than 50% of that plant, it's spending its time recuperating from the beating. It's not spending its time and energy making more forage for you. Natural disturbances simulate major ecological change. Okay? So look at this. Tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, lightning strikes, wildfires, insects, large herd of herbivores in migration. We think about massive or incredible disturbances, okay? So this herd of buffalo that we try to think about mimicking our grazing in the fashion that they did, we can't probably pull that off to a T in today's systems, but we think about the amount of disturbance from some of these things. This is key, right here. Right here, this slide is key. The frequency needs to go down, the intensity needs to go up, and the time needs to go longer. So we have timing, frequency, and intensity. Look at our natural disturbance patterns, variable timing. And we could argue that lightning strikes happen about the same time every year. But, you know, the thing about lightning strikes and fire was that they were pretty random. They didn't happen in May every year. There were some years that went by and lightning didn't even cause a fire. Some years it did. The frequency and the intensity. So let's go back to our grazing system and look at that. We tend to start by the calendar, move by the calendar, end by the calendar. That is not obliging this slide, okay? It's not working for us. Mimic natural disturbance patterns under changing environmental conditions. So if we have a system that we had the 80 acres that we divided in half, and then we made 8 paddocks out of it, and we started to move them. Now think about what would happen if I took the opportunity to move those animals that are moving, say, every 3 days. 3 days, well, let's say 5 days, because that's easier to do the math. Because I know my 5 times table better than I do my 3 maybe. So 8 paddocks, 5-day rotation, 7 paddocks times 5 is 35 days of rest before I come back to that paddock. But if I take the opportunity to do daily moves, when I can, I don't have to do daily moves 365 days a year to make a change. But then what is my rest period? So now I turned 35 days into rest to now I'm in 5. Now I'm struggling with the math myself. I turned that into 35 times 5. Right? 150? 75 days? 175 days? Is that right? What do you think that did? That can't be right. I'm just thinking about that. Help me out, John. You've done this for a long time.
30 times 50 is,
If you don't change the frequency, you're only getting 39.
No, I'm changing the frequency because now I was in one pasture for 5 days, and so I got 35 days of rest. But if I graze on a daily move, then that pasture rests several 4 more days. That's right. That's right. So I'm in a daily move, and I've increased my intensity dramatically. I've increased my rest period, not so dramatically. But I've increased if I go back to this, I've increased the intensity, or such like this. I have stretched my timing out a little bit. I could do more. And my frequency. That's key. Don't do it the same time every year. Yes?
With those daily moves, you went from 8 paddocks and now you've got more paddocks? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if you ever said that.
So now what I've done is, instead of just being in 5 days in one paddock, what I've done is I've put them in a particular spot within that paddock for 1 day. So now I've reduced the area that they have access to, and they move, and they move, and they move.
You can make smaller paddocks and just run
I've got much,
pretty quick.
yes,
Right.
yes.
Kind of like using temporary wire to subdivide that
We
same
can
paddock you used
temporary
for
wire
5
to
days.
subdivide that, and that would be ideal because we may not be able to do that year round. And I don't have to. I can do that till maybe I need to quit because it's too hot and I need to worry about shade. Maybe I need to do something different. But I just pick up where I left off, and I don't start at the same place every year. So get that randomness in there. So plants grazed at different times of the year to facilitate pasture diversity. We're coming right back around to another one of those points, increased diversity. So why do I have the plants that I have? Most likely because I'm grazing for them. What I'm doing to my system will select for those plants. If you continuously graze close, you'll have, in my part of the world, you'll have fescue and ladino. If I want something besides that, then I have to change the way I graze. And then I can have something that will tolerate my management. If I want to encourage orchard grass, I graze taller. If I want to encourage some other natives to come in, some other grasses, some more diversity, then maybe I don't even graze that particular field in April that year. Maybe I just skip over it, start in a different pasture. Maybe I don't graze it till June. Maybe I graze it, I don't graze it in the fall. Maybe I winter stockpile, and I change that up. Plants graze fewer times per year for total plant recovery of desirable plants. That is back to our 50% slide. Let your plants grow forage. Let your plants not spend all their time trying to repair themselves and their root mass. Most plants graze light to moderate to enhance root biomass, a high degree of trampling to protect soil surface, feed soil life, short grazing duration to prevent regrazing of desirable plants. Intensity high leads to okay? So, if we look at not doing the same thing, so that's key, is not doing the same thing over and over in our grazing system. I got to keep moving because he said I only had a couple of minutes, and I'm gonna skip because there's a couple of important slides that, and I wish I could see them down here, but I can't. So. I had a lot of slides here to get to, and I got to get to this one. I got to get to it because the growing potential with sufficient recovery, obvious, when the plants are spending their time growing the forage and not repairing themselves. Okay, this is the slide we got to get to because this is why it works. Overgrazed. And in my part of the world, you guys might be a little higher up here because of your soils. But 2,000 pounds per acre of dry matter, we get this number right here. You graze it, just like the slide that you saw before, and here's what you get. You get 1,800 pounds of dry matter for your cow, and I'll guarantee you that 90 is high, but I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt because it looks like a pool table. Okay? That's what you get.
You're sucking up every parasite.
And you're sucking up every parasite, every liver fluke, every clostridium, everything that all these speakers have talked about. You're sucking it right up. Good point, John. Thank you. Managed grazing. Take half, leave half, 4,000 pounds per acre dry matter. You're using half, and you get a jump on that, and now, albeit it's only 200 more pounds of forage, but you've just increased your ability to graze your animals by 200 pounds per acre. And the next step, if you use adaptive management and you start to really affect what you're doing out there, you start to increase that diversity, you increase the management and the things that you're doing to create that, look what happens. Now we took it up by 600 pounds of dry matter for your cow. So we can increase the forage, we can do it with, we can decrease the inputs, but we've got to increase your management. And we have to diversify your management. That's key, is diversify your management. We don't have time, we're out of time. We gotta go, right, Robert? We've got 10 minutes, but length of grazing period and the animal performance. There is nothing down there in the plant worth grazing. I don't know if it's in here, but I've got a slide that shows the nutrients, the density, the stuff that's doing your animal some good. It's not down in the last part of the plant. It's in the top part of the plant. So you took the bottom part that didn't do you any good and cost you the regrowth of the top part. There it is, right there. I didn't think it was in here, but look at that. The high forage quality, it's up on the top. This didn't do you that much good to even eat it. All it did was cost you the next round of the good stuff. Use feedback to adaptive management to fit the ecosystem. Be flexible. Don't get in a routine. Emphasize hands-on management. Get out there and see what's going on. This is moving by the calendar. This is what we tend to do. It's easy. We don't have to think. This is what we need to be doing. And I will guarantee you, the cows, the calves, whatever you've got out there, they'll follow you. They'll follow you wherever you want them to go. And you know what? There's no reason, if you get over here and you want to take them here and you have to come through here to get there, and they come in here and they all disperse, just go have your glass of iced tea and give them 5-10 minutes to figure out that they can't just run off and go back out there, and they'll follow you to the next pasture. You know, there's no reason to get all crazy and get 3 or 4 four-wheelers and try to push them. Just give them a minute to let them figure out what they're in, and they'll follow you right on to the next pasture. Intentional randomness. And I'm going to just put that down because I'm going to quit because the yellow shirt's coming after me. So, intentional randomness is what we have to put into our management, and we need to read our forages and not just go to the next pasture because that's what we've always done. Go to the pasture that needs to be grazed. And things will begin to repair, and it will get better and better and better. Questions, real quick. We got just a few minutes before the bell rings. Yes.
On stockpile.
Yes. So,
So like now this time of year,
yep.
this is not average here. We don't hardly get into this time of year.
Yes.
This is, if you graze it down short, does it do this, is it the same effect on the grass?
I don't have the. So, it's not growing.
Right.
But now that's key, because now if it is growing, we need to put a back fence up. If you're cold enough, we're not cold enough. Right now, we're not. It's going to want to grow. So I would suggest that around the day 5, you need to put a back fence up and not let them go back where they were. You can, if you're on a daily move, you could get 4 or 5 grazings. But then it's going to want to regrow, and they're going to want to eat it on their way back to the water. And that is not good. So we can take it a little shorter than we still don't want to nub it, but we can take it maybe shorter than we would during the grazing season. Not a lot. If we're trying to maintain 5, we can take strict grazing down to 2.5 or 3, but we don't want to take it too short because that's going to just make it have a hard time recuperating in the spring. But if they get a second bite opportunity, we need to back fence them and bring our water forward if we can. So it does hurt it to regraze it if it's trying to regrow. Got time for one more question, maybe. Yes.
On one of those graphs, you showed it was the 1, 2, 3, all the way to 7. How come that 7 for the animal quality was higher than the 6, 5, and 4 previous to that?
Because it grew. 5 days, we're going to have a second bite opportunity during the growing season. So it declines, and then it comes back, and the animal will benefit, but your plant takes a major hit. I beat you while you're still in the bed. That's what happened right there. So that's what that chart shows, that opportunity to get that regrowth.
One thing about Drexel, he may be wrong, but he's never in doubt.
Type A personality is what they call me, and David, Dr. Tori, and Ledley. Type A personality, and that is, let's see, always certain, seldom right.
I didn't say that. Thanks, Drexel.